Boy, do we have a lot to be proud of. We have a great deal to be proud of. Kelly, Danae, Eric, Chris, Kirsten as well, who isn't here with us tonight. This is a remarkable group of people. We have a lot of alums. We have a lot of people that are part of our community that really are questioning the status quo, really are acting beyond themselves, far, far beyond themselves. They are creating enterprises. They are coming up with new business models. They are creating economic value in ways that people didn't even think about 5 years ago. They are bending many of society's paths, lots of them fundamentally unsustainable, and that is an important thing for all of our futures. Their businesses have deep-rooted social values, the underpinnings of the products and services that they provide. You know, this sustainability and also this financial sustainability and societal sustainability are going hand in hand, as you've heard them describe. We talk as a school about the imperatives of our sector, of our mission, of the talent that we get to work with. It's an enormous responsibility. Some of you have heard me say my kids are 10 and 13. They're going to be around in the year 2080. I'm not going to be around in the year 2080. I don't expect to be. They will be. So far out. They're going to be. So what things do we need to get done now? What kind of talent do we need to have in the system to get the sorts of things that we need to get done now? That's one of the things as an educator you have to think about, right? That's one of the reasons why we talk so much about path-bending leaders. If these are paths that cannot be extrapolated linearly, then what kind of human capital is going to help bend them? Let's get concrete. Let's deliver it. Let's do this. Let's do it together. It's an important part of what our school is about. I'm going to shift gears now, and I'm going to introduce our last speaker, who is also very much in this spirit. He is a leader in a 100-year-plus old company whose core purpose back then, as it is today, to bring transportation to the masses, as he put it to me earlier today, the mobility business. I'm delighted to invite John Viera, the Global Director of Sustainability and Vehicle Environmental Matters at Ford Motor Company, to share some of his stories about how he's been working from within one of the world's largest, oldest auto companies to create a more sustainable path for us and in so many across the world in so many countries. During his 25-year tenure, John has held many key positions. He's achieved a number of significant sustainability milestones, including being chief engineer for the Expedition and Navigator SUVs and launching the development of natural gas-fueled and electric pickup trucks back in the 1990s. Native of Chicago, he earned his Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and also his MBA from the University of Michigan. He resides near Ann Arbor with his wife of 20 years and their 3 children. We're pleased to have John Viera here with us tonight. Thank you very much, John, for being here.
Thank you very much. Wow, I am blown away. I was telling Kelly, I said, after those talks, time is up. Let's go home, because that seriously, that was inspiring. All of you, that was incredibly. I am blown away. Does this happen every year at this event? Seriously, I'm truly blown away. And you know, the one thing that came to mind to me as I was sitting there and I was listening to each of the speakers, and if you were to not understand, if you could not understand anything that they were saying, right? So you didn't understand English, you didn't understand anything that they were saying. The passion in how they delivered their message was incredible. You would have walked away inspired just by the passion. I'm serious. Did you all feel that? Seriously. I mean, each one of you, I think that's tremendous. And even Dean Lyons, I mean, I speak at, a lot of schools, and usually when the dean gets up to talk, man, I'm in good shape, right? Because people are falling asleep. But even Dean Lyons, really, I mean, he even had passion. So there is something special. There is something truly special here at Haas. And I thank Haas, I thank the CRB, Joe, for having me come and speak to you all. It's truly an honor. And, I was telling Joe and Dean Lyons earlier that as the Global Sustainability Director for Ford, where we're really looking at what should the long-term environmental and social strategies be? Myself and my team actually have spent a lot of time out in the Bay Area, right, for two reasons. Number one, the Bay Area is rich in terms of entities that have some excellent vision in terms of what we need to do from an environment standpoint. So they tell us what the problem is and what we need to do, right? But you also have Silicon Valley that gives you the how of what needs to be delivered. So when I was first asked to come here, I'm like, this is cool. I'm going to be in the audience. I'm going to be listening to all this great stuff. They said, no, we want you to speak to the audience. And I was going, oh, boy, this is going to be a little bit challenging because you all usually are the ones that are teaching me. But when I found out what the topic was, right, redefining business for a sustainable future, I said, you know, that is probably something I could talk about. Because at Ford Motor Company, we've had to define and redefine ourselves. Sometimes in good times, sometimes in not so good times. So what I wanted to do in the few minutes that I have here is to kind of take you through a journey of how have we redefined our business at Ford Motor Company in this 100-plus year company that Dean Lyons mentioned. So by doing so, let me start back with Henry Ford. So obviously Henry Ford, founder of our company, and he created the Ford Motor Company, and like a lot of his peers, he was building a motor car. And who bought motor cars back when he first started the company? The rich, right? It was a car for the rich. Well, for those of you who know about Henry Ford had some deep values in terms of, number one, the environment. He was one of the first true environmentalists. But secondly, he really sought to change the world, right? That he wanted to have a positive impact on society. So obviously, he went through the thought of redefining the business. And his redefining of the business was the Model T, right? A vehicle that the masses could afford. So not just the rich anymore. He redefined the business, the masses can afford it. But in terms of creating a better world, what else did he do? He created the $5 a day wage, right? And that was uncalled for during that time. So not only did he create a vehicle that people can afford, he actually created a middle class. And when you look at the makeup of the people at Ford Motor Company, he was hiring African Americans and a lot of foreigners from a variety of different countries that couldn't get jobs, a lot of immigrants. So he was really well ahead of his time in terms of truly making a difference. And that redefining of the business had a huge impact on society, but it also was fantastic business for him, right? I mean, it created a great business, and it created tons of jobs. So, the good news when you think about innovation, innovation can do a lot of things for society, and sometimes it could actually create a lot of jobs. So, that was all good. So we're moving along, and Henry Ford, this type of a business model, creating, jobs for the masses could go on for 100 years. And he had a very famous ad that he took out in the January 1925 Saturday Evening Post. And the caption of the ad said, "Opening up the highways to all of mankind." And there's a picture of a man and a woman. They're two kids, and they're standing on a bluff, and they're overlooking the countryside, which was like probably the U.S. And that was his vision, that he wanted to provide this transportation for the masses. And the bottom line was, back in those days, a very, very small percentage of people ever went farther than 25 miles from the place they were born. They just didn't go that. I mean, 25. So what the automobile provided was the ability to go farther than that. But more importantly, it wasn't so that people could now move out to the suburbs, right? More importantly, it also allowed access to health care, access to food, so it really did have a huge impact on society as we know it, really globally. All right, so let's fast forward now. We're now talking about, I want to call it 1950s, 60s, 70s. What happened to Ford Motor Company? We're kind of living off the Henry Ford model, making good money, everything is good. Kind of lost our way a little bit, right? And I know many of you know about, the American automakers back in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and the dark days in the 2000s. We suddenly decided that the way we need to be in business, we got to forget about small cars. The environment really doesn't matter. Gas prices are cheap. They're going to stay cheap forever. We're just going to be the maker of large cars and trucks. It's the way to go, right? Making a ton of money, it's the way to go. Well, a couple things happened along the way. First of all, in the mid-2000s, the environment became a pretty big issue. Fortunately, we had an executive, a CEO at the time, Bill Ford, that said, we know that the environment's a problem. We as a company need to do something about it. As a matter of fact, Bill Ford came out with a statement that the company published in 2005. So this was before the IPCC, climate report. In 2005, Bill Ford came out and said, climate change is real, man has an impact on climate change, and we need to do something about it as a company, right? So great. All right, let's put together a strategy to do something about it as a company. It's a little problem, right? Bill said it at the top of the house, wasn't moving anywhere inside the company. It was about that time, a little bit before that I came on board, and I was talking to my team, and I'm like, we need to put together this strategy that addresses climate change, but at the same time allows us to make money on small cars and trucks. And it was a tough road to haul. I was waiting for, on high, the word's going to come down like, Moses coming down with the tablets, and everybody's going to get in line. I'm going to lay the strategy out on the table, and everybody's going to line up. Well, that wasn't going to happen. And I actually had to rely on outside collaborators, right? In the case, where's Mark Lee? He's a board member. I told you, Mark, I was going to call you out. He's in here somewhere. He's probably going to raise his hand. There's Mark back there. So we actually worked with an organization, with Mark Lee in particular, where I said, Mark, I got to be able to convince people that we need to put together a strategy that allows us to sell small cars to large cars, small trucks to large trucks, make money on them all, and actually have a positive impact on climate change by reducing the CO2 coming from a tailpipe. How do we do it? And some of the great advice he gave me was, don't wait for the words from on high to filter through the organization. You've got to go into middle management. You got to go into the lower ranks, and you need to convince them that this makes sense. You came from the operations, John. Your people came from the operations. That's how you go and make change. So, we've been talking a lot about startups here, right? A lot of you are going to be working for large companies. The way we actually drove change at our large company in terms of actually adopting this strategy of large cars to small cars, best-in-class fuel economy, and now our electrification vehicles, it was because we found change agents at the entry level, the junior level, and the middle management level that were change agents that allowed us to deliver that strategy. Many of you need to be those change agents, right? Don't wait for the top of the house to tell you. You could be that change agent in a large company. So we've made some great progress. One of just very quickly, something that was very positive for us. When we got the approval that we had this package of a future vehicle plan, this year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, it was going to include large cars, large trucks, small trucks, and electrified vehicles. One of the things that we knew, we needed to borrow a lot of money because all we were making were large cars and trucks. Well, we took out the largest home loan in the history of the corporate world. We took out $23 billion to actually make this change to our product plan. A little bit fortuitous because we took that money out like in 2006 before the financial collapse. When the financial collapse happened, our competitors across town weren't so lucky. They went into bankruptcy. It was because we were able to redefine our business that we were able to borrow the money and actually change our portfolio. So, that's the good news, and so we're marching along on that path, and so I'm just going to close now by talking about, so we should be comfortable, right? I have people within my company say, hey, you guys did it, great, you redefined the business again, we're good for another 100 years. And I'm like, not really. Got some bad news, we got to redefine it again. Like, what do you mean redefine it again? Well, here's the issue, right? Yeah, we're producing fuel-efficient vehicles, we have electrified vehicles in our portfolio, that's all fantastic. This is a problem. 7 billion people in the world today. By 2050, that number is going to grow to 7 billion today, 9.5 billion by 2050. We got 1 billion cars on the road today. That number is going to grow to 2 billion. So don't get excited and say, that's a great growth opportunity for Ford. Great, let's just produce more cars. That's the demand is going to be 2 billion in order to move that number of people and their goods. Little problem though, right? All that growth is happening in developing countries where, number one, if the people could afford a personal use vehicle, they wouldn't be able to move around because all those folks are living in large cities. So this is the dilemma, right? If we want to be a company that's going to last the next 100 years, our current executive chairman, Bill Ford, the great-grandson of Henry Ford, is saying, I can't have the same business model that my great-grandfather had. I need a completely new business model of moving goods and people if we want to be part of that solution. So what we're going through right now is a new redefinition of how do you move goods and people in the future, given the fact that population is going to be there, that people aren't going to be able to afford personal use vehicles, but they're still going to need to move around. And that answer is a different mobility set, right? It's not going to be just about the personal use vehicle. It's going to be about other modes of transportation. We could elect to be part of it or not, right? We could die off as a dinosaur just working on personal use, or we could think about other modes of transportation. We could think about other ownership models, car sharing. Maybe it's car sharing in the cities. Maybe it's a village car where a village, an individual villager, outside of Shanghai can't afford a vehicle, but maybe the whole village can. It's those types of concepts that we're being challenged now to think about. So while we came through this economic downturn and we have pretty sustainable personal use vehicles, we can't be done. We have to be thinking about the next 100 years, and it's going to be mobility solutions that we're not used to actually operating in or flexing those muscles. But if we want to be a company that's going to be part of mobility in the future and providing mobility in the future, we better be figuring it out. And we need individuals in our company that can help us figure that out and not tell us the status quo is good enough. And what I'm seeing here tonight, boy, I'd love to have a lot of folks from the Haas Business School and the CRB. So I'd like to thank you for allowing me to share the journey. Again, I am just blown away. My energy level is so high. I started very early this morning, right? It's going to take me hours before I'm going to be able to go to bed because the energy was so high. But it's been a true honor and a pleasure, and I just feel so privileged to be up here after these wonderful stories. So Joe, Dean Lyons, thank you very much for having me, and you guys have just a phenomenal body of individuals here. Utilize it. Thank you.
Thank you. I will ask a couple of these, if I may, John.
Sure.
So, this question, you touched on this before, but for, aligning your business goals and your operations with a lot of the imperatives of our time, climate change and others, you've gone so far in that direction. For those working at companies that perhaps haven't gone as far in aligning against those sustainability type goals, you mentioned sort of grabbing people on the ground. Who are the change agents? Are there some other suggestions that you could make to people that are in companies and they feel like those companies need a little bit more alignment?
Yeah, I would say, Dean Lyons, the other suggestion I'd have is that you need to understand what your role is if you're going to be a change agent, let's say in addressing climate change. You need to understand how the particular operations work in your company and translate for that operation. How do they then change their model to address whatever goal you're going after, right? You can't just throw the goal out there and say, you guys go figure it out, right? Because most people in that operations have their heads down and they're just trying to get through the day, right? You have to translate for them. How do they go about changing what they do in their operations to reach that goal? So we spent a lot of time doing that.
Great example. So obviously that takes some insight into the business, right?
It does.
You have to have a line of sight into the business, or
it absolutely does.
Right? That's a wonderful example.
It absolutely does.
A wonderful example. Here's another one, and I use this phrase, this notion of path-bending leader. But as you see, so now I'm thinking a little bit more from our perspective, as we're in the talent development sector, right? If you were a dean of a business school and somebody said your job is to produce a path-bending, right, a redefining kind of business leader, what are the sorts of things that you would try to deliver into that curriculum? What are the things that you value highly at Forward?
That's a great question. So first of all, I love the thought of you got to challenge the status quo. Right? So there's a good way of challenging the status quo and a not so good way. So I have a lot of people come into my office and they have no business background, no business sense, and they go, hey, I'll challenge the status quo all day long, right? I'll give you ideas from here until the cows come home. The problem is because they have no business sense, where they challenge the status quo, their ideas, there's no way you could even implement something, even a thought of implementing it, because they don't have the fundamental business knowledge understood. What we really need, Dean Lyons, is how do you create somebody and how do you develop somebody that is able to challenge the status quo on the one hand, but on the other hand, understands the fundamentals of how business runs, right? If you have that combination, that's the person that we need.
Love it, love it. And you mentioned in your own case that idea of has seen the operation, has done the operations. That gave you so much credibility, right?
Exactly.
So much of a platform for doing that. So you know, here's a question here. As Mr. Ford implied, in poor nations, livable cities will require congestion taxes or may require congestion taxes. Does Ford support policies like that? And if so, what technology is Ford working on to enable poor nations to tax or at least find ways to internalize congestion?
Whew, wow, yeah, that's a good question because we know it's you know, the big issue out there is when you talk about mobility, and particularly in the poorer countries where there is a lot of congestion, we actually see mobility as a human right. I mean, it's a human right. The question is, you know, how do you provide that type of mobility in an affordable way? You know, congestion taxes, is that one way of doing it? Well, I guess it's a way to, you know, to tax the rich and try to, you know, provide transportation to the poor. I don't know if that's the solution set so much. I think the real solution set is congestion taxes are associated with, again, focusing on personal use vehicles. I think we have to broaden our mind to say, what are the most optimal modes of transportation of moving people that are disadvantaged, that can't afford their own personal transportation? And then how do we invest in those types of businesses versus just saying our only business is personal use transportation, so if we want to make personal use transportation more affordable to the poor, let's tax the rich. I don't think that that's very sustainable.
Reframing, which is something that we talk a lot about.
Right?
Bigger
exactly.
Frame. Bigger
frame. Reframe, and let's maybe not think about personal use vehicles.
Thank you. Here's another one. How can Ford be part of the self-driving car phenomenon, like what Google is exploring?
So we have, I laugh because we're looking, I mean, the real cool thing, and something I should have brought up here, collaborations are so key, right? I would say, you know, 20 years ago or so, you know, we were a big, powerful Ford. We knew it all. Anything that had to do with transportation, we got out of our research activity, right? Doesn't happen like that anymore, right? We don't have the money to have a big research arm, but secondly, we're not on the cutting edge fast enough to incorporate those changes. So it's really all about collaborations, collaborating with other companies. We've had a variety of discussions with Google, and you know, we're partners with Microsoft, and so we've actually brought in other partners to help us with this mobility solution set moving forward. As we think about autonomous driving, we believe that that could happen one day. We think that there's kind of a continuum from what we call automated assisted driving to autonomous driving. There's aspects that we could start working on now, but true autonomous driving is probably out a ways. But the good news is we don't have to work on that alone as a company. We're not that proud anymore, right? If we need to go out to another company that has more expertise, we're going to go ahead and do that.
Thanks for that. So I've got two more questions here. Here's one, big one. How many years do we have to reverse climate change?
Oh my gosh! Wow! These are big questions.
Look.
Do I get an honorary degree if I answer this right? Do I get an honor?
Get on it.
Boy, how many years do we have to reverse climate change? You know, that's a really tough question because, you know, one of the things that we struggled with, and Mark Lee and others have helped us with this, is how aggressive do we need to make our own internal targets to address climate change? And one of the comments that we got back was that, you know, I don't know how many years it is, but one of the things that every company and everybody needs to do right now is get started now. My fear is that when people are spending a lot of time thinking about how many years do we have before, you know, climate change becomes a problem, is they're not doing anything. And the best feedback we got was start doing something now. Right? Yes, you need to think about, you know, if you need to increase that level of intensity or just keep it the same. But the worst thing you could do is analyze to death to determine what is the level of intensity you need to be doing. So just start now. So I can't answer the question, when is it going to be reversed, but get started now. And if everybody got started now, we'd have a better chance at least stabilizing climate change.
Thank you for that. And so here's one that connects to something that I mentioned, and we'll have to close on it. What are the mix of skills, specific skills, young people should develop to create the kind of world that we're going to need for Dean Lyon's kids in 2080? But another very big question. But what sorts of things come to mind?
Well, you know, what I think is, you know, we're still a society where we have businesses where you need to know the operations of the business, right? And I think having a skill or understanding a particular area of focus or a particular area of the business is extremely important to have. Once you have that foundation, then be a change agent within that particular discipline. So the good news is, the cool thing is, right, we don't have to tell you specifically, you need to be focusing on this topic, be passionate about that topic, and if you do that, you can change the world. We need changes in so many different areas. Find the topic that you're passionate about, know that subject very well, and then be a change agent by addressing that particular subject that you have such a passion about.
John Viera, thank you.
Thank you.